Just a kid anymore. Your mouth beats on body, your face. I'll follow your face. Sure as to fix some deep inside. We're alive. Who was right?
Unable to withstand the pressure of his stare, Akira averted his eyes without thinking any longer, and he was certain the man's gaze would cut him to ribbons from the inside out. A moment after Akira looked away, the man stepped smoothly back. His sword sang in the wind as he whipped it to the side. He stood there for a few moments more, watching Akira without saying a word. But then, he turned his back, a clear gesture of indifference. The bitter taste of defeat rose in Akira's mouth. By averting his eyes, he had refilled his weakness. He was no longer worthy to be this man's opponent. Still, he had no one to blame but himself. It was the first time he had ever felt so outclassed. Even now, he tingled with the memory of it, as if his body were roasting in an invisible flame. He had sensed the man's strength, not with his head, but with his skin. His pulse was racing even now. The hard sound of boots on pavement reached his ears. When he looked up, the man had already vanished into the shadows. Was that man fighting in Igura too? As Akira gazed into the shadows that had swallowed him, he felt his excitement fade into chagrin. Igura was nothing like Blaster. He had understood this on an intellectual level, but now the knowledge had been hammered into his bones. The success meant nothing there. He had never been one to take pride in his position. The truth still left a bitter taste in his mouth. After standing there silently for a few moments more, he sheathed his knife and picked up his bag. Akira's unpleasant mood had vanished during the fight. Thinking it was time to get back to the others, he started toward the hotel. He barely made it out of the alley before sensing someone behind him. Footsteps. And not just one set, but two. No, three. He quickened his pace, but they kept coming. They were chasing him. They didn't feel like much of a threat, but Akira wasn't keen on facing multiple opponents at once. Igura's basic rules required that fights be one-on-one, with witnesses, but these guys weren't necessarily fighters. The man leapt out of an alley up ahead, blocking his path. He sprinted toward Akira, knife outthrust. His charge was clumsy and reckless, but this was the best he could do. As the man stabbed at him again, Akira grabbed his wrist and pulled it toward him, using the momentum of his charge to throw him over his shoulder. As he relieved the wounded goon of his knife, Akira felt another man at his back. He spun, snapping a roundhouse kick to the second man's stomach, then followed with a toe kick to the jaw. The man collapsed, knife skidding down the sidewalk. The third man, who had emerged from the same alley as the second, froze, knife in hand, beneath Akira's stare. Although his arms were still tired from the struggle with Seki, it wouldn't make a difference against these three. He wouldn't even need his own weapon. Akira took a step toward the last of the trio. A sharp crack split the air, and pain like 1,000 white hot needles blossomed along his back. For an instant, his body forgot how to breathe. The pain gave way to a numbness that spread all the way to his fingers and toes. He sank to his knees, unable to stand. The man behind him, the one he kicked in the stomach, was crawling toward him with something in his hand.
残念でした。ビビっただろ。
A stun gun. As he tried to get up, the man grabbed him by the hair and pulled him to the ground. Ignoring the pain in his scalp, Akira flipped himself forward to keep from landing on his back. If his back touched the ground, he would lose.
おお頑張るね。感電しても仰向けにだけはなりませんか。負けになっちまうもんな。
The first man, the one he'd thrown, crouched down and peered into his face. His hair had a peculiar shine, like it had been dyed silver. After a moment, the man smirked and stood up, then stepped past Akira's head and lowered himself onto Akira's hips. He pinned Akira's arms, which were still numb, behind his back.
俺と遊ぼうか。ギャラリーもいるしさ。タグ奪い合っちゃおうぜ。
The stone was smoking. A low laugh echoed in Akira's ear.
どけよ。
はあ？んなこと言われて毒バカがどこにいるんだよ。
さっき腹蹴られた時、マジムカついたんだけど、とっととボコってタグ奪っちまえよ。
まあまあそう焦んなって。こいつさ、よく見ると結構いい面してるんだよな。
The man straddling Akira reached out from behind and forced his chin up. The second man, who had used the stun gun on Akira, was glaring at him while rubbing his jaw. The third man was standing a few steps away, still paralyzed with fear. 3 pairs of eyes, all clouded. These men were doped up on rain.
え？お前ってそっちの気あったんだっけが？勘弁してくれよ。
差別は良くないぜ。まあ俺は顔が良くってツッコめりゃ男でも女でもいいんだけどな。
ただの欲求不満かよ。
The man laughed cruelly.
話せ。
Overcome with revulsion and anger, Akira tried to shake the man off, but he was at too great a disadvantage with his arms pinned behind him.
おとなしくしてろよ。
The man grabbed another fistful of Akira's hair and pulled his head back as far as it would go.
負けちゃう前にいい思いさせてやろうっつってんだよ。
The man's hot breath in his ear made him nauseous. When a rough hand started to undo his belt, Akira felt that he could hear the blood drain from his face. He recalled the scene he had witnessed soon after entering Toshima, a man wrapping his defeated opponent. No matter what, Akira would not let that happen to him.
Doke!
Akira bucked with all his strength, trying to throw the man off. Perhaps the man had felt his position secure after Akira's last attempt, because this time Akira was able to free his arms with surprising ease. He started to rise on his elbows, but the man punched him in the side.
おとなしくしろって言ってんだろうがよ!
The blow made him dizzy, but he set his jaw against the pain and rose to his knees. There, cold still touched his cheek. He froze.
それ以上暴れると喉かっ切っちまうぜ。
The man slid his knife up Akira's cheek and whipped it in front of his eyes.
ちょっとぐらい痛めつけてやんねえとわかんないんじゃねえの？
そうだな。
The man seized Akira's right waist and twisted behind his back. His joints screamed.
お前、利き腕こっち？まあどっちでもいいか。切り刻んでやるからさ。
The man started poking at Akira's arm, looking for a good spot. Finding one, the knife slipped through his clothes and sank into the flesh of his arm. Pain lanced up his spine.
痛いか。なあ。
The man pulled the knife out, then seized Akira by the jaw and forced him to look into his smiling face. Akira could see the knife, its tip dyed in the color of his blood. The man opened his mouth and took a lick. Disgusted, Akira squeezed his eyes shut.
もう一回ザクザクいくか。
The blade went up against his arm once again. Akira braced himself for the coming pain. However, after a moment's silence, the man's knife fell to the pavement with a sharp, metallic sound.
おい。
The other two men gaped. Their friend was slumped against Akira's back, motionless. Akira took this opportunity to free his arm. As he did, the weight on his back stirred. The stab would hurt, but he ignored it, and got up, quickly putting some distance between them. The man threw his head back, scrubbing at his throat. His tongue protruded from a mouth wide in agony. It was almost like he was having a seizure, save for the strange discoloration of his skin. The man slowly toppled backward. Akira could do nothing but watch in minute astonishment. What was happening here? Noticing a metallic scraping sound, he looked down to see a bundle of tacks had fallen from the convulsing man's pocket. By this point, the man had collapsed and now lay face up on the pavement. His back was touching the ground. Akira had won, in which case... Heart racing. Akira reached for the bundle of tacks.
Damn it!
The man with the stun gun shouted in protest, but made no move to intervene. Clearly, he was shocked as well. Akira ripped the tag from the man's neck, shoved the whole bunch into his pocket, and seizing his abandoned bag, burst into a run. He ducked into the first alleyway he saw and kept running.
てめえ待ちやがれ
Their voices pursued him for a while, but eventually faded into the distance. He had meant to run back toward the hotel, but the labyrinth of alleys had made him lose his way. Suspecting that he was headed in the wrong direction, Akira slowed to a stop and slumped against the wall. He panted hard, shoulders heavy. Now that he was no longer running, he could feel his lungs straining to draw breath. He closed his eyes until his breathing had relaxed, though his pulse continued to hammer in his throat. Hoping that his heart was not about to explode, Akira pried open his sweat-drenched hand to verify what he was holding. 5 tags, the ones he had taken from the silver-haired man. There was no need to feel guilty. At the time, the man's bag had been touching the ground. But then how was he supposed to explain his laden mood? Why would his heart stop racing? He couldn't shake the image from his head. The silver-haired man, convulsing in agony, clutching desperately at his throat as he collapsed. What had triggered that sudden episode? Certainly nothing Akira had done. Had the man been sick? No, if anything, that had seemed more like poison, or some kind of allergic reaction. But all he had was baseless speculation, and besides, the man had been a drug addict. There was no telling what problems his use of rain may have caused. And yet, Akira couldn't help but feel something ominous at work, a disquieting sensation smoldering in the pit of his stomach, like the wailing of distant sirens, and the man's tortured expression was burned into his mind. Realizing that it was pointless to dwell on the matter, Akira took a breath and stuffed the text into his jacket pocket. There were other things to think about, thanks to his curiosity. What was supposed to have been a chance to cool his head had led, instead, to a singular encounter. Shaky. Those dead bodies scattered around him had most likely been his handiwork, and his mere presence had been enough to make hardened igra fighters flee with their tails between their legs. Akira didn't blame them. He knew exactly what they'd been running from. He felt it when he and Shiki had crossed blades. The pain in his right arm chose this moment to assert itself. He pulled the arm out of his jacket to examine the wound. The wound was on his upper arm. A rivulet of blood flowed toward his elbow, but the wound itself didn't seem that deep. Some basic first aid, and it ought to be fine. Feeling a great deal more calm, Akira decided it was time to head back to the hotel. Fortunately, this alley seemed to be connected to the main road. He pulled himself off from the wall and headed toward the avenue. Just as he approached the end of the alleyway, 2 human figures cut across his line of sight, accompanied by a dragging noise. He didn't need to see their faces to know who they were. Their gait and towering stature said it all. The executioners. His heart suddenly racing again. Akira pressed his back to the alley wall and peeked out at the street. The short-haired executioner, Kiriwa, was dragging another man along by the collar. The man was limp, lifeless, dead. Akira barely stifled a gasp. He knew that man. He was a silver-haired man whose tags he just taken. Come to think of it, Rain had mentioned that the executioners disposed of defeated fighters. His feet were already carrying him backward. By the time he recovered from his shock and stopped himself, it was already too late. His heel had found a scrap of fallen metal. A heavy, metallic sound echoed through the night. The blonde man, Gunji, who had been skipping down the sidewalk while humming to himself, turned to look in Akira's direction. A bolt of lightning terror shot up Akira's spine.
なんかいる。子猫ちゃんかな。
Akira held his breath and backed up slowly, hoping that the thick darkness would hide him. After the encounter with the dog and the mess with Takeru, the last thing he wanted was another run-in with his two. Just then, a pair of arms seized Akira from behind, sealing his mouth with a hand and dragging him backward. The darkness swallowed him. As he struggled, a familiar bass voice hissed in his ear.
騒ぐな。奴らに見つかる。
This voice. The person shoved Akira toward the back of the alley and stepped in front of him. His broad-shouldered torso was clad in a shabby shirt. Otomi.
猫猫猫ちゃん。
Gunji hunched over, peering into the shadows with narrow eyes, barely visible past his bangs. His mouth soon crooked into a frown.
猫猫。ああ。違った。くたびれて擦り切れた親父だった。
Otomi stepped forward before he could catch a glimpse of Akira. Leaning against the wall with his arms folded, he looked a picture of unflappable calm.
くたびれてて悪かったな。
くたびれてんよ。何やってんだそんなとこで。かくれんぼか？
するか。お前らと一緒にすんじゃない。年寄りの散歩だよ。それ持ってとっとと行け。
With a look of disgust, Otomi jerked his chin at the man Kiriwara was pulling.
あんまこそこそ嗅ぎ回ってっとさ、殺しちゃうよ。
Gunji let out a strange cry and jumped to his feet.
こんな枯れてるのなんか殺したってつまらんだろう。泣きわめいて逃げるのが好きなんだろう、お前らは。
大好物。
The two executioners shared a grin.
けだものどもが。早く飼い主んとこ帰れや。
With an air of resignation, Otomi waved his hand to shoo them away. Gunji turned to look at his partner.
そういや、ジジと親父で同類じゃねえかよ。仲良くやれよ。
うるせえな。脳みそ足りねえひよっこは黙ってろや。
Kiriwara's pipe met Gunji's skull. With a satisfying thwack, Gunji stumbled back, clutching at his forehead.
脳細胞いくつ死ぬと思ってんだ。
Kiriwa started off down the sidewalk, ignoring Guji's screeching. Guji ran to catch up with his partner, and then two vanished shouting down the road toward the palace. After confirming that they were gone, Motomi turned around, sighed, and gave Akira an accusatory look.
お前さんな、処刑人がいるときはもちーっと慎重に動けよ。今はあいつらの機嫌が良かったからいいが、もし見つかったら死ぬまで、死んでも追っかけられるぞ。
あんたは平気なのか？
イグラには参加してねえからな、俺は。それにあいつらだっておっさんなんぞ追っかけても楽しくないんだろうよ。って、そもそもなんでこんなところにいたんだ？
Akira looked away. He didn't want to explain. Instead, he responded with a question of his own.
あんたこそ。
俺はシキがこの辺うろついてたって話聞いたから、ちょいと探りにな。まあ俺が着いた時にはもういなくなった後だったが。
シキ？
Akira tried his best to feign ignorance.
まあなんつうかな。イグラの参加者なんだが、神出鬼没で恐ろしく強い。奴が通った後には死体しか残らない。そんな感じで恐れられてる男だ。どこで何やってんだか知らないが、めったに見ない。出てきたと思ったらすぐに消えてる。大抵は誰か殺してな。まあそんなんだから伝説として語られてるようなとこもあってな。密かに憧れてるやつも多い。謎の多い男だ。
Akira recalled the man in black. Indeed, Akira had never encountered anyone with an aura like his. But anyone that's wrong should have no trouble collecting the text to challenge your ray.
シキはイルレには挑まないのか？
俺の知る限りではないな。でも奴が麻薬王の座なんか狙ってるとは思えないけどな。他に何か目的があるか、ふらっと気が向いた時に人を殺して楽しんでる。そんな感じじゃないのか？
An elusive igra fighter who didn't care about winning. Strange, indeed.
で、まあ、シキが出没した近辺でも他に一悶着あったって聞いたから、ちっと歩き回ってたんだ。
他？
イグラのタグ取りがな。
Motomi abruptly narrowed his eyes and gave Akira a searching look.
なんだよ。
顔も汚れてるな、お前。
Motomi's thick figure scrubbed roughly at Akira's cheek.
お前さんか、そのタグ取り。
Akira didn't have anything to hide. Fighting for tags was business as usual in the city. But for some reason, he found himself looking away.
取られたのか、タグを。
いや。
取ったのか？
When he nodded, Motomi wrinkled his brow and put on a little smile.
そうか。
Akira searched Motomi's face, unable to tell whether the older man was relief or trouble or...
さっき処刑人が引きずってたやつ、あいつが多分そうだ。
寄り寄った相手か。
あ
あ。なるほどな。まあ気をつけろよってイグラに参加してるんだから、そんなこと言われなくてもとっくに腹決めてるか。
Motomi stared at Akira's face for a moment, then suddenly broke into a grin.
お前さんは特にな。気ぃつけた方がいいぞ。
Was it just his imagination, or was Motomi teasing him? Akira leveled a stare at the older man.
何が？
いやー。
Letting the question dangle, Motomi looked up at the sky, grinning. He kept rubbing at his unshaven jaw.
ここいらは女が極端に少ないだろ。だからまあ気をつけろってこった。
どういう意味だ？
そういう意味だな。
He did know, and he knew that Motomi was just joking with him. But having run into precisely the sort of trouble not long ago, he felt a surge of irrational anger. Seeing that Akira had enough of his teasing, Motomi shrugged and put on a softer smile.
まあまあ冗談だ。マジになるなよ。
He pat Akira on his right arm. It was only a light touch, but Akira grimaced at the pain. Motomi's expression turned sober.
どうした？
いや、
怪我してるのか？こっちが。
Motomi gently turned Akira's arm to look.
破れてるな。刺されたか。
ああ、でもそんなに深くない。
うん。一応処置はしといた方がいいだろうな。ここからだとホテルが近いが。そういや、圭介はどうした？
リンと一緒にホテルにいる。
お前さん一人でこんなとこにいたのか？
Motomi regarded Akira with mild surprise.
少し外の空気を吸いたかったから。
ああ。気分転換に外に出たら襲われたとか、そんなとこか。
Akira let this pass without comment. It was close enough to what had really happened, and he didn't feel like explaining the rest.
まあいい。とりあえずホテルへ戻ろう。
Akira had no reason to refuse.